I heard the tires squeal long before I saw them. 3 men barreled down my driveway, crowbar, wrench, and gloved hands aimed straight at my safe, holding the original property deeds. My back screamed from old seal injuries, but I didn't flinch. Rex and Valor, my 2 massive German shepherds, each well over 140 pounds, flanked me, muscles, coiled eyes locked on the intruders. "Step back," I warned calmly. They laughed, thinking I was bluffing. 1 foot forward and chaos hit. Rex launched at the first man, teeth tearing through denim, dragging him to the asphalt. Valor struck the second, ripping jacket and pinning him flat. Screams, metal clattering, the quiet cul-de-sac froze. Then I heard a scream from the end of the street. Evelyn Harrow, the HOA president herself, stood there pointing at us. This wasn't just about a few stolen papers anymore. Whatever she had planned, it was bigger, and somehow I knew it was only the beginning of a fight I couldn't ignore. Evelyn Harrow stepped onto the street like she owned it. Clipboard clutched tight, heels clicking against the asphalt. She didn't glance at the chaos behind her, my dogs, my intruders, just pointed at the driveway. "That safe goes with us," she barked, voice sharp enough to cut through the night air. Her eyes, wild and calculating, flicked to me for the briefest moment, daring me to stop her. I didn't move. Rex and Valor stayed tight against my sides, ears forward, muscles coiled. I could see the control she craved in every measured step, every clipped word. Evelyn had built this HOA empire like a fortress, inventing rules nobody voted on, fines nobody authorized, and now she wanted my property deeds, the keys to the only proof I had that she had no legal claim to my land. "I don't care about your injuries or your dogs," she added, smirk twisting her face. "You're standing in the way of what's mine." Her entitlement wasn't subtle. It radiated off her like heat from the pavement. I realized then why she hated me. Specifically, I refused to bow, refused to pay the fake fees, and had the audacity to question her authority. And as she turned her attention back to the men, I understood the stakes. Everything I owned, everything I had rebuilt since leaving the Navy, was about to be tested. I had barely set foot outside that morning when the first warning arrived. A letter printed on glossy HOA stationery was shoved under my door. "Your backyard exceeds allowable setback. Immediate correction required or fines will follow." My back tensed. Every word felt like a jab, a reminder that Evelyn Harrow never forgot, never forgave. I sighed, tucking the letter into my jacket pocket and calling Rex and Valor closer. The dogs padded behind me, ears up, alert. Even with my old injuries, I could move enough to patrol the property. I noticed fresh tire marks in the gravel, a trail leading straight to my safe holding the original property deeds. Someone had been here already, measuring, already watching. I didn't panic. I could never afford to. But a knot of anger tightened in my chest. Later that morning, I saw a familiar black SUV creeping along the cul-de-sac, slowing at the curve. I crouched behind the fence, camera in hand. 2 men stepped out, snapping photos of the back of my house. One raised a clipboard, pretending to inspect the property. My muscles coiled not to attack, but to prepare. Rex growled softly. Valor bristled. They weren't pets. They were my shield. By afternoon, another HOA notice appeared, taped to the front gate. Unauthorized alterations detected. K9 seconds must be restrained immediately. I read it twice, shaking my head. Alterations. I hadn't touched a single thing since I rebuilt the fence last fall. Evelyn's control obsession ran so deep she invented rules just to harass me. I glanced at Rex and Valor. They were calm, poised, ready. I was counting on them and on my own wits. That evening, a knock at the door sent a chill down my spine. 2 men in black vests, stamped with HOA insignia, fake of course, stood at my threshold. "We're here for a site inspection," one said, clipboard out, voice practiced and confident. I knew better. I leaned back against the wall, watching the dogs shift tense and ready. "Step aside," I said. My voice was even, but the command carried the weight of discipline, years in the making. The men didn't flinch. They moved toward the backyard anyway, measuring tape in hand, stepping dangerously close to my safe. I opened the camera feed on my phone and started recording. Every motion, every inch of intrusion was documented. This wasn't just harassment anymore. They were building a paper trail to claim ownership. Evelyn wanted that land, and she wanted it badly enough to bend the law. I'd already copied deeds, scanned property maps, and stored evidence of her earlier violations. They moved closer, laughing at what they assumed was my frailty. One even reached toward the fence. Rex snarled, low. Valor's hackles rose. I took a shallow breath, my back stiff, but my mind razor sharp. "Do not touch anything," I warned. My voice was calm, steady, but in that tone lay a warning. One step wrong, and everything changes. As they fumbled with measuring equipment, I noticed a corner of the safe peeked from the shadows of the shed. My pulse quickened. This was the reason they were here. Evelyn wanted it, and soon they would be gone with it. I crouched lower, calling to Rex and Valor with subtle hand signals, preparing for the inevitable. The next day, I discovered the first real breach. The lock on the shed had been tampered with. Scratches marred the metal, faint but unmistakable. Someone had tried to access my safe. My stomach sank, but I forced myself to stay calm. Years of SEAL training drilled restraint into me. Panic never solved anything. I reviewed security footage. A black pickup had reversed down the driveway at 2 a.m., 2 figures slipping from the vehicle, moving like shadows toward the shed. One wielded a crowbar, the other a small crowbar-like tool. They were methodical, professional, paid. Evelyn had escalated. This wasn't about a fine anymore. It was about taking the land and everything proving it was mine. I ran my hands down Rex and Valor's backs, massive, coiled, ready, each well over 140 pounds muscles like steel cables. They knew. They had trained for situations far worse than this. My old injuries slowed me, but these dogs compensated. My mind raced. I needed evidence control and patience. If they returned tonight, the confrontation would be inevitable. And then it hit me, this wasn't random. Evelyn wanted not just the land, but to erase my proof that her HOA actions were illegal. If she succeeded, she could rewrite history, take the backyard, and claim the road as her own. My pulse quickened not from fear, but from the clarity of what had to be done. I prepared the secondary safe, moved duplicates of deeds, photos, and surveillance backups inside. Tonight, if they came back, they wouldn't just get a fight, they'd get Rex, and Valor unleashed the full force of training I'd relied on for years. And somehow I knew Evelyn had no idea what she was about to awaken. The night stretched thin, and I couldn't let my guard down. I crouched behind the fence, watching shadows stretch across the driveway. The first safe had been tampered with. Scratches on the lock disturbed soil around the shed, and the evidence was clear: someone had been here. I traced tire tracks in the gravel, taking note of tread patterns. Every movement, every indication mattered. Rex and Valor shifted beside me, muscles coiled, tails rigid, each well over 140 pounds of precision and force. I whispered subtle signals, barely moving my hands, and they understood instantly. My old SEAL injuries throbbed, a dull reminder that I was no longer the unstoppable man I once was, but the dogs made up for it. Suddenly, a black pickup rolled onto the cul-de-sac, headlights cutting through the darkness. 2 men slipped out, tools in hand. Crowbar, wrench, gloves. One glanced at the shed, eyes widening slightly, but only slightly. He didn't know what Cole Mercer had behind him. I stayed perfectly still, letting them approach the shed, measuring, leaning, testing the lock. My stomach clenched. This wasn't just about fines anymore. This was Evelyn Harrow's attempt to rewrite property lines, erase evidence, and claim my land as her own. Every inch of that backyard, every foot of that safe mattered. I took a breath, signaling subtly. Rex exploded forward at the first intruder, teeth sinking into denim, dragging him to the asphalt. Valor struck the second, tearing jacket and pinning him flat. Screams cut through the night, the metallic clang of tools hitting concrete adding to the chaos. By the next morning, I had uploaded all security footage and documentation to the county clerk and my lawyer. Time-stamped videos, photos of tampering, tire tracks, and disturbed soil, all evidence that Evelyn's HOA filings were falsified. The clerk confirmed someone had filed fraudulent boundary changes, but legal intervention required undeniable proof. I walked slowly through the backyard, Rex and Valor flanking me, ears forward, every muscle tight. My back protested each step, but I couldn't let that slow me. I needed clarity. I cross-referenced HOA filings with my scanned deeds. Evelyn wanted that land, and she wanted to erase any trace that it was ever mine. I sent encrypted copies of video to a neighbor I trusted. If Evelyn tried to challenge the evidence, there would be independent witnesses. The tension ratcheted up with each message sent. I could sense Evelyn watching, planning her next move. At 4:30 a.m., the gravel crunched. The black pickup returned, tools ready, intruders approaching the shed once again. The first man had a crowbar, the second a dolly. My heart rate stayed calm. I knew I wasn't alone. Rex and Valor stiffened, massive alert, ready to explode on command. I positioned myself where I could see everything back, aching shoulders tense. The men approached the shed, unaware of my silent signals to the dogs. My phone vibrated with another HOA warning. Immediate access required or legal action will follow. I ignored it. Legal threats didn't matter. Now they had already escalated into physical action. The first hand touched the shed's lock. Valor lunged instantly, teeth tearing through denim, yanking the man down. Rex slammed into the second, ripping his jacket and pinning him to the asphalt. Screams clanging metal and the smell of fear filled the street. Even at my worst, my injuries could not hinder the precision and strength of the dogs. Then I heard her. Evelyn Harrow's scream echoed across the cul-de-sac. "Do whatever it takes. Bring me that safe." Her voice cracked and carried full of rage. My stomach twisted. She had crossed every line. Tonight wasn't just about property or fines anymore. It was about exposing everything she had built on lies, and I knew there was no turning back. Every piece of evidence, every motion, every inch of my backyard was now a battlefield. The fight was about to become unavoidable, and nothing could stop the storm Evelyn had started. I barely had time to exhale before the pickup's doors slammed open again. The two intruders, crowbar and dolly in hand, moved toward the shed like predators. Rex and Valor stiffened beside me, ears forward, every muscle taut. I didn't move a step. My back throbbed, but years of SEAL training reminded me panic solves nothing. Then I heard it, Evelyn Harrow's scream from the end of the street. "Do whatever it takes. Bring me that safe." Her heels clicked against the asphalt, and she raised her clipboard like a weapon. The neighbors peered from their porches, some frozen in shock, others dialing their phones. I whispered the command under my breath. Rex and Valor exploded. Two massive German shepherds surged like coiled springs. The first intruder barely had time to lift his crowbar before Rex tore into him, ripping denim, yanking him down onto the asphalt. Valor hit the second jacket, shredded, pins him flat, teeth clamped precisely on the wrist. Screams split the quiet cul-de-sac. I stayed calm, observing, calculating each movement. I had one shot to control the chaos, and I did. With both men pinned, I bent down, retrieving the crowbar and dolly. The sound of metal clattering across the asphalt punctuated the moment. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the secure folder, and showed the neighbors the time-stamped footage, tire tracks, shadowy figures, the previous night's tampering, all clearly directed by Evelyn. One of the intruders started struggling, sobbing. It was her. She paid us. She told us to take it to stop him. His voice cracked under the weight of fear. Rex and Valor held perfectly still, tense but obedient. The street was silent except for the gasps of onlookers and the rattling of tools abandoned on the asphalt. Then I flipped the wallet from my pocket, my veteran ID, K9 handler, certification, tactical authorization, and held it up. Evelyn froze mid-step, her face drained of color. Deputies screeched into the cul-de-sac, guns drawn. Their headlights illuminated every detail, the safe in the shed, the two men pinned by K9s, Evelyn, frozen like a deer caught in headlights. I could feel the weight of the evidence crushing her bluff, every lie unraveling in real time. Evelyn's voice trembled, trying to reclaim authority. "You don't understand, I'm protecting the neighborhood." But the proof was everywhere. The video, the tampered filings, the neighbors' eyewitness accounts, the admissions from her hired thugs. A deputy stepped toward her slowly, cuffs in hand. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted assault, and ordering civilians to commit harm." Her jaw dropped. Her clipboard clattered to the asphalt. The two intruders, still pinned by Rex and Valor, were sobbing and shaking, each admitting under deputies' questioning that Evelyn had orchestrated everything, paid them under the table, armed them, and instructed them to neutralize my K9s if necessary. The neighbors whispered among themselves, shock and relief mingling in the air. Rex and Valor slowly released the men, staying alert, each paw planted firmly on the asphalt, eyes locked. Evelyn's empire, the fake HOA authority, the threats, the forged documents crumbled in one cinematic instant. I straightened muscles, aching dogs at my side. The street was quiet except for the echo of sirens approaching, and I realized everything she had built on lies, greed, and intimidation was gone. The street felt unnervingly quiet after the deputies secured the intruders. Rex and Valor stood beside me, ears twitching, muscles still tense, ready for any last movement. My back ached, but the adrenaline kept me upright. I exhaled slowly, realizing the fight had ended for now. Neighbors emerged from their homes cautiously, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. A few stepped closer, offering apologies for ever doubting me for staying silent, while Evelyn's reign of intimidation had escalated unchecked. I nodded to them, keeping my gaze calm but authoritative. "It's all right," I said, voice hoarse. "Just make sure this never happens again." Some nodded, hands shaking as they recounted what they had seen: the men, the tools, the dogs, and Evelyn's frantic screaming figure at the cul-de-sac. The quiet street slowly began to regain a normal rhythm. A child wheeled a bicycle past, oblivious to the chaos, while Rex and Valor's low growls reminded everyone of the consequences of crossing lines. I finally let myself step fully onto my driveway, feeling the concrete beneath my boots, hearing the soft rumble of my dog's tails brushing against the ground. It was peaceful but heavy, the calm after the storm, the street itself seemingly holding its breath in respect for what had just unfolded. The deputies had remained on scene, cataloging evidence, questioning witnesses, and recording confessions. By the time a county attorney arrived, the story was already airtight. Evelyn Harrow had orchestrated the theft, armed civilians, and attempted to destroy proof of her illegal HOA claims. I showed the attorney the video feeds, timestamps, photos of tampered locks, and copies of the deeds. Within hours, charges were formalized: conspiracy to commit assault, incitement of violence, filing fraudulent HOA citations, and attempted tampering with property evidence. The intruders each received sentences, factoring in permanent injury and cooperation with law enforcement. Evelyn herself was immediately taken into custody, her face drained of color as deputies read her charges aloud in front of the street, neighbors watching silently but intently. The county also issued binding orders: no HOA property reclassification without homeowner consent, third-party survey verification, and a community vote. The documents were clear, enforceable, and left no loopholes. I watched as Evelyn's smirk vanished, her authority evaporating in real time. The safe, intact in my shed, remained under my control, a silent symbol of victory and diligence. Even with my injuries, I felt the weight lift the legal system, restoring what had been threatened and affirming the truth in black and white. With the legal mess settled, I turned back to the backyard. Rex and Valor trotted beside me, alert but relaxed tails swaying. I pulled out a tennis ball, tossing it across the grass. The dogs shot forward like rockets, leaping and spinning, a perfect display of strength and discipline, yet playfulness at heart. I smiled, despite the aches and bruises, watching them chase, pin, and wrestle over the ball. Across the street, Evelyn's HOA board had begun rebuilding the fence they tried to manipulate this time, along the correct property line. The community, slowly realizing the full extent of her deceit, began to reclaim their autonomy. Apologies came in soft whispers, handshakes, and nods. No one celebrated loudly. The relief was quiet, a shared understanding that justice had been delivered. I leaned against the safe fingers, tracing the edge, feeling the solid metal under my palm. Years of careful preparation, patience, and trust in Rex and Valor had turned the tide. The dogs rested their heads on my boots, eyes bright, still alert. I exhaled, knowing the night's events had cemented more than just legal victory. They had reinforced respect, boundaries, and trust. And as I watched the sun set over the hills behind our street, I whispered to myself, feeling the calm fully for the first time in months: nothing is louder than a man protecting the piece of land that bears his name.